Congressman Name recognized that expression. It was the confident smile of someone who knew they were about to win. He clenched his teeth and started to argue. We still need to think about what's fair. President Go interrupted him with a sly grin. Speaking of fairness, Congressman Nam, I hear you just moved into a condo near the Hunters Guild headquarters. His face turned bright red with anger. President Go pressed on. Why choose such an expensive place when there were cheaper options nearby? The congressman's anger boiled over his face turned nearly purple. He looked like he might swing at President Go, but there was one big reason he didn't. The president was a top-tier S-rank hunter. But President Go knew way more than Congressman Nam about handling someone who's cornered. Remember this, President Go said, wrapping up his argument. You can buy a fancy condo worth millions, but you can't buy back your life. Jin-Ho had never seen an A-rank gate before, and now he was face to face with one. Jin-Yo tilted his head back to take in the view up to the top of the portal. Whoa, the gate was so tall that it was impossible to see all of it at once when they were standing this close. Jin-Yo's mouth had been hanging open for about 20 minutes already. Compared to that, Jin-Woo's reaction to seeing an A-rank gate for the first time had been pretty underwhelming. Your jaw's about to fall off, Jin-Yo, Jin-Woo said with a smirk. Whoa, boss. Sorry about that, Jin-Ho said, eyes wide with awe. This gate is huge. I've never seen anything like it before. Jin-Woo couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of how Jin-Ho would react if he ever saw the massive gate at Gwangali Beach. Jin-Ho looked around shyly, scratching the back of his neck. Boss. Are you sure we're okay without a collection team or something? This feels kinda big for just us. Don't worry, we've got this, Jin-Woo said with a grin. With a flick of his hand, 30 shadowy figures stepped out of the darkness. His most trusted soldiers, who had been by his side forever. We're good. Trust me. Don't worry, these guys will handle it, Jin-Woo said, noticing Jin-Ho's surprise when the soldiers appeared out of nowhere. Got it, boss, he replied quickly. The soldiers in their black armor looked super intimidating, like they meant business. Just then, some employees from the Hunters Association walked over. One of them was someone Jin-Woo recognized, Manager Woo, who ran the surveillance team. Hunter Sung, Manager Woo said, taking a device that looked like a radar gun from one of his team members. May I start the inspection? Sure thing, Jin-Woo answered, stepping back so the shadow soldiers could move forward. Jinchul checked how strong each soldier's magic was. Wow. Jinchul's eyes popped wide with surprise when he saw the results. Luckily his sunglasses hid how shocked he was. Every single one of them was at least a B rank. And most were even a rank. Jinchul and his team sailed through the tests needed for an A-rank gate permit. But here's the kicker. Jinchul actually had way more soldiers than Jinchul realized. If they had similar levels of magic power, Jinchul smirked slightly. People who think this is special treatment for Hunter Sung just don't get it. Jinchul gave a small smile, shook his head, and then looked up at Jin-Woo, nodding. I'm done. Everything's good here. Jin-Woo nodded and smiled back. He was all set to kick off the raid, but there was one last thing to handle. Hunter Sung, over here, someone called out. Reporters behind the police line fired off questions one after another. Can you tell us how you're feeling about leading the Ajin Guild's first ever raid? What's the story behind the name Ajin Gaze? How are you connected to Sushin Yu, the guild's third founder? The excitement was palpable, as Hunter stepped forward with a big smile. It was a huge day for Jin-Woo Sung and his brand new Ajin Guild, so big that reporters showed up super early to capture every second of this exciting moment on camera. Usually the guild members would handle keeping the crowd in check, but today that job belonged to employees from the association. Jin-Woo stood there, gesturing out at the sea of people gathered before him. Hey, I thought my stuff was supposed to be a secret, Jin-Woo asked, looking puzzled. Jinchul smiled. We can keep your personal info safe, but we can't hide where the gate is. Don't worry about the reporters. We've got that covered. Just focus on the raid. Okay? Jin-Woo watched as the association staff tried to handle the crowd of reporters. He had a feeling he knew who was causing all this commotion. Please tell the president that I sincerely appreciate his help. I'll pass that along, Jinchul said with a nod of respect before turning and walking away, leaving Jin-Woo and Jin-Yu alone at the gate. You sure you'll be okay? Jin-Woo asked. Yes, boss, Jin-Yu replied, standing up straight with a serious look on his face. Jin-Woo let out a low chuckle at Jinhyo's dramatic tone, which was almost comically intense. Thanks for the support, he said with a grin. But deep down, Jin-Woo was worried. Jinhyo was only a D-rank hunter, and stepping into an A-rank gate was like jumping straight into danger. He had tried to talk Jinhyo out of coming along as his porter more than once, but Jinhyo wouldn't budge. Finally, Jin-Woo gave in, thinking it might be easier to protect just one person anyway. Still, he couldn't help but think that after experiencing the chaos inside an A-rank dungeon, Jinhyo would probably reconsider his decision to tag along next time. Little did Jin-Woo know this mission was only the beginning of their adventures together. Besides, it'd be nice to have someone to talk to, Jin-Woo said with a grin. Shall we? Jinhyo replied, giving him a nod. Let's go. As they turned to leave, they heard a third voice behind them. There stood Jin-Chul, dressed in armor, instead of his usual sharp suit. He looked a bit out of place but ready for action. I thought you left, Jin-Woo said, raising an eyebrow. President Go asked me to keep an eye on your raid. Jin-Chul explained. Just to make sure everything stays safe. Hunter Sung, Jin-Woo smirked. So, are you coming with us? It was hard to tell if Jin-Chul's face turned red, because the armor was uncomfortable, or because he felt awkward about tagging along. Either way, he gave a firm nod and fell into step beside them. Sure thing. The man shrugged. He was just trying to do his job, after all. As long as you don't mess with any magical creatures, he said. I'm on the surveillance team, right? I'll just stay back and watch. As sounds good to me. Jin-Chul smiled and gave a thumbs up. Thanks a lot, Hunter Sung. All right, let's do this. With that, Jinhyo and Jin-Chul walked through the gate, with Jin-Woo following close behind. Whoa! The familiar chime rang out, and a message flashed on the screen. Ping. You have entered the dungeon. Our President Gun-hee. Go glanced at his watch with a grin. The raid should be underway by now, and he wished he could watch Hunter Sung in action for himself. But his health just wouldn't let him. Still, he couldn't help but feel excited about how it was all going down. So he had sent his most trusted employee instead of going himself. He was super excited to hear all about Manager Woo's adventure. But then he thought, wait, I don't have time for this. Gun-hee pushed those distracting thoughts aside. His desk was piled high with papers. Even though he had worked hard on the paperwork, after the strange event at the school, the pile still looked just as big. Sure, here's the rewritten text. It had actually grown. Even with his packed schedule, his interest in Jin-Woo hadn't faded one bit. Maybe someday he'd get to tag along with Jin-Woo, but that was probably just a silly thought. He let out a bittersweet smile and shook his head. Refocusing on his work, 3 hours flew by, and then a knock at the door pulled him back to reality. Knock? Knock? Sir, it's me, Jin-Chul, a voice said from the other side. Gun-hee had been eagerly waiting for this report. Come on in, he called out cheerfully. The door creaked open as Jin-Chul stepped inside. Gun-hee stared at him in surprise. What happened? He'd expected Jin-Chul to return looking just fine, but the guy looked exhausted and worn out. Manager Woo was with Hunter Sung. So why does Jin-Chul look like this? Manager Woo was with Hunter Sung. So why does Jin-Chul look like this? Of course, go ahead, Gun-hee said, moving smoothly from his desk to sit on the opposite couch. Jin-Chul flopped onto the sofa with a thud. He looked really tired and rubbed his face with both hands. Gun-hee couldn't resist asking, what happened in there? Why do you look so worn out? Sir, Jin-Chul replied. Hey, is there something on my face? Nope, you just look super tired, Mr. President replied. Jin-Chul let out a deep breath. I've barely slept, Mr. President frowned. What's going on? You look like you've been up for days. Jin-Chul shook his head slowly, staring down at the floor. That wasn't a raid. Then what was it? Jin-Chul looked up, his eyes wide with fear and disbelief. It was a massacre, he said, his voice shaking even though he was usually brave and confident. As the leader of the surveillance team, Gun-hee's eyes widened in shock. A massacre. He gulped. Jin-Chul nodded firmly. Yes, sir. There was no other way to describe what he had seen. The president asked him to explain everything. So Jin-Chul told the whole story, leaving out nothing. The dungeon turned out to be a Naga nest. Gun-hee said, squinting as he remembered the beast. Nagas are super cool but dangerous creatures, half human, half sea serpent. They love living in wet places and are experts at both magic and fighting. Hunters find them super tricky to fight, because they're not just strong magical beasts, they also stick together in groups. But really, that shouldn't be a big problem for someone like Jin-Woo, right? Jin-Chul agreed with Gun-hee's assessment. He even felt a little sorry for the Nagas, he admitted. Wait, what? Jin-Woo wondered. When over 30 Nagas had blocked their path, Jin-Chul had momentarily worried about facing such troublesome beasts. But then something changed. Our surroundings grew dark. Jin-Chul continued. To be precise, the shadow beneath Jin-Woo's feet began to spread out. Jin-Chul's hair stood straight up as the black soldiers popped out of nowhere. That was when the battle started. Or really, the massacre began. Jin-Woo's minions sprang into action, hissing and shouting as they tore through the Nagas mercilessly. Jin-Chul couldn't help but think, at least the humanoid warriors in black armor, and the high orcs showed some control, but the bear-shaped and ant-like minions were a whole different story. They acted like wild beasts. Some of the ants were even eating the dead magic beasts. But Hunter Sung Jin-Woo put a stop to that right away. Jin-Chul shivered at the memory of how one shadow ant had tried to swallow a dead Naga's head whole. Before it could, Jin-Woo delivered a swift kick, sending the ant smashing into a wall. Gun-hee wasn't sure why he was shivering, whether it was because of the terrifying minion, or because Jin-Woo had tossed it aside like it meant nothing. Watching Jin-Chul get more worked up made Gun-hee feel uneasy too. Are those minions strong? He asked. The answer was clear, yes, they were. No matter what form they took, whether they looked human, like orcs, bears, or even giant ants, every single one of them was a powerful fighter. But one minion stood out more than the rest. It was wearing a black helmet and had a fiery red mane that made it look like it was on fire. Jin-Chul looked up at President Go with a serious expression. Would you believe, he said, that every time this minion swung its sword, lightning shot out? President Go's eyes widened in shock. Gun-hee couldn't believe what he was hearing. Oh my, he muttered, his voice trailing off. The lightning wasn't just any ordinary attack. It had the destructive power of fire magic, and the speed of light magic combined. That made it super powerful and fast. A combination that sounded almost impossible to defeat. For that reason, only super skilled mage hunters could use it, and even then, using it over and over was tough. Gun-hee couldn't believe what he was hearing. That lightning struck every time the minion swung its sword. Only because the info came from someone he really trusted. Could he even consider believing it? But that wasn't the only shocking news. From what I've seen, this minion is way stronger than an A-rank hunter, someone said. Gun-hee's eyes widened in disbelief. Is that true? He asked sharply. It was mind-blowing to think a regular minion could be almost as powerful as an S-rank hunter. Jin-Chul, who was one of the top A-rank hunters himself, shook his head. Honestly, I don't think I could beat that minion one-on-one, he admitted. If someone as confident as Jin-Chul felt that way, it must mean the minion was at least rank. Gun-hee sat up straight on the couch. He knew Hunter Sung was amazing, but he had no idea even his minions were this strong. Gun-hee muttered to himself, trying to wrap his head around it all. It's too bad. He didn't get to see any of this with his own eyes. Imagine how mind-blowing it must have been for someone just sitting on a couch. So how much harder must it have been for Jin-Chul, who saw everything up close? No wonder the A-rank hunter was so shaken. It must have been one shocking moment after another for him. But then something even more surprising happened. Jin-Chul continued, not done with his story yet. Check this out. His eyes darted back and forth as he told this part of the story. The vice president from the Ajin Guild had handed out pickets as the ants, and they got right to work. These weren't just any ordinary ants. They were digging magic stones out of the cave walls, and carrying both the stones and the bodies of magic beasts outside. Jin-Chul couldn't believe what he was seeing. The way the ants worked together, so organized and focused, totally blew his mind. Jin-Woo was basically the ultimate worker. No task was too tough for him. Some people called Hunter Sung a one-man strike squad, but Jin-Chul wasn't having it. In his eyes, that label didn't do Jin-Woo justice. After all, Jin-Woo could tear through dungeons, grab the dead beasts and dig up gems like it was nothing. He's not just some solo hero who charges in alone. Hunter Sung was more like a one-man army, handling everything on his own. Jin-Chul believed it was unfair to reduce someone so capable to just a one-man strike squad. To him, Jin-Woo was basically a walking guild all by himself. Sure, the vice president of the Ajin Guild had tagged along for the raid, but let's be honest, it wouldn't have made much difference if he'd stayed home. Hunter Sung was basically a one-man team, and Gun-hee couldn't believe it. He slapped his knee excitedly. I knew it. I was totally right about him. Gun-hee kept grinning from ear to ear. Jin-Woo was going to shake things up in the world of Korean hunters, and maybe even make a splash worldwide. Then we finally reached the boss's lair, he said, and you could practically hear the excitement in his voice. Was there even more to the story? Gun-hee turned his attention back to Jin-Chul. The younger hunter told him that while most Nagas are 2 or 3 times as big as a person, the one in the lair was 4 times larger than a normal Naga and super intimidating. Did those minions take down that magic beast boss super fast? Gun-hee asked. Jin-Chul shot back. No, they didn't. He actually sent all of them away except the worker ants. What? Why? The president looked stunned. Jin-Chul shrugged. I was confused too, so I asked Hunter Sung why he held back his minions, right before the big battle with the boss. That's Gun-hee leaned in without even realizing it, eager to hear Jin-Woo's answer. What did he say? Jin-Chul paused for a moment, like he was thinking back. He said, if I rely on my minions too much, Jin-Woo muttered to himself, I'll lose my edge. He took a step forward and summoned the demon monarch's daggers in both hands. No need to send in his soldiers this time. Only the boss and its 4 guards were left. With a powerful stomp, Jin-Woo surged forward like lightning. Before the guards could even react, he was right in front of the boss. Mutilation. Dozens of sharp lights exploded from the lower half of the boss's body. Shure! The boss screamed and thrashed wildly. As Jin-Woo leaped into the air, he used one of the guards' heads like a springboard to propel himself higher. Midair, he locked eyes with the towering boss, and swung his daggers in a deadly arc. Shurish! The boss's head flew clean off its neck with a grisly F. An alert chimed in Jin-Woo's ear. You have defeated the master of the dungeon. You have leveled up. A huge grin spread across his face. Yes. As he landed, he spun around quickly, taking down the remaining guards in an instant. Messages kept pouring in heffing, ping, ping. The chime wouldn't stop ringing. Jin-Woo's confusion didn't last long. Suddenly a flood of notifications appeared. You have reached level 100. Your job exclusive skills have leveled up. Skill. Shadow extraction has leveled up. Skill. Shadow storage has leveled up. Skill. Shadow extraction has leveled up. Skill. Shadow exchange has leveled up. Skill. Shadow exchange has leveled up. Skill. His job exclusive skills had never shown any signs of leveling up before, even though he used them all the time. Now they were all upgrading at once. His heart raced, bap dump, bap dump. It had been a while since he'd felt this excited. Only Jin-Ho and Jin-Chul were with him in the boss's lair, but neither of them seemed to care what Jin-Woo was doing, so without hesitation he pulled up his status window. Skill. Skill. Sound sounded again, as the screen popped up, showing everything about him, from his current level down to what he was wearing. He stopped at the list of his job exclusive skills. E-job exclusive skills. E-job exclusive skills. Active skills shadow extraction LV. 2. Shadow storage LV. 2. Monarch's domain LV. 2. Shadow exchange LV. 2. It really happened. Seeing was believing. Jin-Woo was especially thrilled to see shadow exchange level up. Finally, this skill was super useful, but the long cooldown had been frustrating. The waiting time was supposed to change depending on the skill level, right? Now both the cooldown and his frustration would be reduced. Today's raid had given Jin-Woo something amazing. Something he was more excited about than leveling up for the first time in a long while. Now he was curious to see how much better his shadow exchange skill had become. With a grin, Jin-Woo slowly opened the skill information window, almost like unwrapping a present.
Peeping!
S-skill, shadow exchange LV, 2 job exclusive skill. Here's what it could do now. Once used you have to wait 2 hours before activating it again. Wait times can change, depending on your skill level. An hour less. Leveling up once had cut down a third of the wait time. Jin-Woo couldn't hide his excitement. 1 level shaved off 1 hour. If this pattern kept up, it was very likely that at the next level the waiting time might drop to just 1 hour. If my skill leveled up even more, Mom and Gina would stay safe, no matter where I go. Just thinking about it got him super excited. Keeping them safe meant everything to him. Jin-Woo noticed the big grin on Jin-Woo's face and asked, Hey, what's going on, boss? Jin-Woo blinked in surprise. Huh? He said, realizing Jinhyo was right beside him. He had been so caught up in checking his stats that he didn't even notice Jinhyo standing there. Then he saw Jinchul heading their way. Jin-Woo chuckled quietly as he closed the status window. He didn't want anyone to think he was crazy, even if they wouldn't say anything.
Yeah.
Something like that, he said casually. Jinhyo nodded, understanding from experience not to push Jin-Woo for details. Jinhyo's eyes locked onto the creature inside the room. Wow, he breathed. For the first time, Jinhyo laid eyes on an A-rank magic beast boss, and it was mind-blowing. The creature looked like a human from the waist up, but its lower half was all sea serpent slithering and sleek. Even from far away it seemed massive. Up close, it was way bigger, and super creepy. Wow, Jinhyo couldn't believe his eyes. Thinking back, the boss had conquered many tough dungeons before. Did he really defeat such terrifying monsters each time? Gulp. Jin-Woo seemed even more awesome than ever, and Jinhyo felt super lucky to stand right next to him. Boss. Jin-Woo looked up from what he was doing. What's up? Jin hesitated for a moment before speaking. I really respect you, boss. Jin-Woo gave him a confused look. Huh? Jinho quickly turned away, his face bright red with embarrassment. Meanwhile, Jinchul stood there with his mouth hanging open in shock. He knew Hunter Sung was strong, but this was crazy. Jin-Woo had just taken down a boss-level Naga like it was no big deal. Normally you'd need a whole team of players working together to beat something that tough. If another squad had seen this, they'd probably feel pretty bad about themselves. Jinchul walked over to the Naga's remains and reached out to tap its scales. They felt as hard as steel. Everyone knows how tough Naga scales are. They're used to make armor and shields, because they're super strong. But then there was Hunter Sung. On the lower part of the beast, some of the scales were crushed or torn, like they were made of paper. Can you believe it? Those nearly indestructible scales didn't stand a chance against him. Talk about impressive. Jinchul stared at the destruction caused by Jin-Woo's mutilation skill, and couldn't believe his eyes. The power of those two daggers was insane. Jinchul wiped the cold sweat from his brow, grateful that Jin-Woo was on their side. Just then, Jin-Woo spoke up from behind him. Could you step aside for a moment? Jin-Woo asked quietly. Jinchul spun around, startled, his heart racing. Haas. Jin-Woo gestured to the Naga's body. I want to make it into a minion, but you're standing too close. Jin-Woo, who'd been watching from a distance, waved for Jinchul to come over. Sorry, Jinchul muttered, and quickly stepped back, his eyes wide with excitement. He couldn't wait to see what would happen next. Jin-Woo had created minions before on their journey to the lair, but now they were about to see something bigger, turning a boss into a minion. The question was, would this huge monster shrink down, or stay just as massive? Jinyo's eyes sparkled with excitement as he waited to find out. Arise, Jin-Woo commanded. The shadow stirred, obeying its new master. Suddenly dark hands burst from the beast's shadow, and yanked its body upward. With a deafening roar, the monster emerged from the darkness, now under Jin-Woo's control. But here's the thing, the minion wasn't as big as Jinchul had imagined. In fact, it was about the same size, or even a tiny bit larger than a regular Naga minion. A laugh burst out of him as all that tension melted away, and his sweaty palms gave away how anxious he'd been.